You told me that you wanted me to record it.
Oh, I didn't even know you were supposed to ask.
Well, that's from Illinois State University, so
yeah,
I don't know if they actually know because they're, but I assume they do.
I think you are. Yeah, I'm sure you're supposed to ask. And heaven knows the government in the state of Illinois would know that.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you know or if any one of you all know, but at the top when you start recording a meeting and it says the recording has been started, can we change that language there so that we can include that type of text?
Oh,
I don't think
I'm
you can.
looking right now.
That's
I think there is a setting.
There is a setting somewhere. Private policy. I think it's at a tenant level setting, maybe.
Yeah,
wow.
That's I'm looking.
Okay. We're going to hang on to that one. We're going to come back to that one. That'll be a very good, nice little.
That is a Teams user group
That's
meeting.
why I'm here.
Question. Not a power.
Daphne, did you expect to be one of the teachers this evening?
I was kind of just gonna sit back and let you do what you do, but I have a lot of input questions and can provide some valuable feedback just from what I'm getting from the city of Chicago.
Right.
Cool. All right. So here's our agenda, Ralph. So introductions. Well, I guess it's not the end of me. Microsoft, Craig Janke. Been doing user group stuff in the Chicago area. Started out with SharePoint user group way back out in Elgin, which is about 30 miles west of the city. 2012, I think I started that. And then we've been doing the SharePoint Saturday stuff, which is migrated into M365 Chicago. And then me and Ralph started this group about, I think it was 2 years ago when I was looking at the slides. There just wasn't one in the area, and we thought we'd do it. And it originally was Power Apps and Power Flow, but now we try to do some Power BI when we get a chance and just call Power Platform, because we don't know when the name's changing from Power Automate, from Flow to Power Automate, and that just takes a lot of it out.
Power Flex or something, I think, is the next name. Power Flex.
Yes.
There's a Data Flex coming.
No, there's
right?
not a Data Flex. It's Project.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. We'll talk about it.
Okay, that was last week's news.
It is.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that.
All right, Ralph, you can introduce your guests.
Yes, so I'd like to introduce, we have a special guest here today, only because I've been working with these guys very closely of late, and for good reason. I have Dave Warner and Hugo Bernier. These are two MVPs in our community, in the Power Platform community, and also on the SPFX, what's called the SharePoint Online or the M365 area. And they're major community folks, and a lot of what we do is about community, and that's why we're here. And they happen to be also the main players at our other second city place, the Toronto Citizens Developers UG. So like if everyone, like, the story of second city is like Chicago and Toronto is like the same thing. So this is our sister city, to be sure. So they're here to talk about a little bit about what's going on in the community, where you can get information, and it's about like community docs, and we'll get there. You'll see it. You'll like it. Pretty sure.
So I think we've heard from Jonathan and Daphne and Tim. I think we've got everybody else who's on the line. We had more people invited. There was over 25 people who invited, but they don't always show up. So
they wait for the recording as usual.
So we will get into it. And I'm assuming you guys can all see my screen, right? So I just like to throw that out occasionally. So we're going to have welcome, and we're going to have intros. And then we're going to do kind of the updates from the Power Automate, which I'm going to rifle through because of the interest in time. And then we're going to do a little bit about SharePoint Designer workflow to Power Automate. We got the community documentation talk with Dave, Hugo, and Ralph. I think you're emceeing that, if I understood how you guys are going to work that.
I'll be doing like a hard-hitting interview of these very important folks.
Okay.
Wow.
Ralph, are you monitoring the door to let people in?
That too.
That too, because I thought I heard a bing. So that would be that one. Let me just check. Oh, and then if we have any, Ralph's got his little tips for the day, and then we will do any closing questions and conclusions. Sound like a plan? If not, I forgot you had those stuff. Ralph goes in and puts interesting transitions into my slides. Power Automate. Hold on a second. Pardon me. I knew I was going to sneeze and I couldn't find the mute button. So Power Automate is going to be featured at Ignite, which is next week. If you guys all didn't know that, I imagine most of you do. And I think I told Daphne, I'm not sure if Tim knows about it. But if you click on this link, it will tell you to what's happening at Ignite around Power Automate. So that's a good one. If you're looking for best practices for production flows, this link has information on that. So lifecycle management platform and some of the changes that have happened in the admin center lately, and then Power Automate flows for August. UI flows. I don't know that. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know that much about UI flows. It kind of rolled out and I haven't been on that. So if anybody wants to speak to that, we'll let them. But if you click here, this has got the August release notes. And to Daphne and Tim, who haven't been here before, but Jonathan knows, I will post a link to this slide deck when we're done with it, so you guys can follow on links. Similar to the notes for Power Automate, we have Power Apps. So there's the link to all the stuff that's happening around Power Apps as far as, nope, that's down here. I moved that down here. Sorry, I forgot what order I put these in. So the information around Ignite and what's happening in Power Apps on Ignite. So if you click to that one, it'll tell you when the best sessions to go for are that. It does have a note to what Jonathan talked about. Project Oakdale will be talked about new, which was originally rolled out as DataFlex, but we didn't, I don't believe Microsoft copyrighted that name and somebody else already had it. So they went back to the internal secret project name, which was Project Oakdale. So if you see Project Oakdale or DataFlex, keep that in mind. This is a list if you're interested in seeing what's on the agenda for new features to be rolling out through 2020 and through 21. That's a good place to check out what's on the roadmap. And this one was actually pretty good, but do I have this one? No, I don't have the announcement that came out today. So this one's about environment variables are now going to be generally available and some ALM, but I don't have the link to this, but did something come out today with the announcement of being able to move between environments?
Yeah.
Did you guys see that?
Yeah, there was a bunch of posts on that today. Yep.
I thought I put that in here.
I will put it in on post.
And then Power BI, we've got exporting actions from Power BI to Power Automate. Pad Nation reports now available. This one's actually pretty cool. A BI Dev Camp on the 24th. That's kind of like a lunch and learn for Power BI. Ted Patterson is going to be delivering that. So, a huge name in the training space. So that'll be good. And then reports and updates are also here. So if you want more information on those things, that's where they belong. And you can click on any of those links. Which takes us to workflows, SharePoint 2010 workflows for Power Automate. So there was a huge announcement on this a few months ago, but we weren't live and we didn't have a meeting last month. But basically, and I think that's why Daphne and Tim are here, Microsoft announced that SharePoint 2010 workflows are going to be retired come November. I believe that Daphne, you guys put in a support case and got an extension until March, right? So
correct.
Some organizations have been getting extensions to March, depending on their size. You just had to file a case to say that. This is a link to the announcement. This is a link to the best practices that Microsoft offers for that. Part of what we're going to recommend is running the modernization scanner. So there's a link to that and how that runs, but basically scanning your environment, looking for these 2010 workflows and trying to put some priorities around them and get some reports. It's not an easy report to run. So just be prepared to that. I think you guys said you already did it though, Daphne, was that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so I had a problem where I had a huge automotive company who had to run like 40 separate jobs because they couldn't run it. They have 18,000 workflows, so it would spit out on them after about 500. So they tried to run it as big jobs, but they kept having to do it. And then and then there's a link down here to a webinar I can't remember who did the webinar, but Vlad Kontanovsko led that. It's actually a really good webinar for seeing the whole process. It's about an hour and a half long, longer than we're going to cover.
Was that a Drew Madeline one?
No, he does something else. I can't remember. I'm bad with names, so.
Well, clicking the link, we'll find it.
We'll find it. But basically, this just means out-of-the-box workflows and SharePoint Designer workflows are going, and once they're turned off, they will not work. So that's the important thing to know. How does it affect you? Once the end-live passes, the workflows will not work. Incomplete workflows will not complete. Workflow history will be deleted. This is an interesting one because I don't know this for sure. I saw it out there that said it will be deleted. And then when somebody else asked me that and I wanted to see it in writing, I couldn't find it again. So I have information on that, or into the product group, but I don't know if they're going to get back to me. But if you want to, then you're going to need to archive that workflow history if you want to keep it, is what I'm thinking. It will be deleted and you'll need to archive it. That was my original message. And you should start rebuilding your workflows now as opposed to later. Because that deadline is going to come a lot quicker than you think. And what if you can't make the date? Now, this was directed at the people who had the date that thought November 2020 was going to be the date. And I don't know if we have anybody on that call that fits into this, but that hasn't already filed a support case and extension. But basically, Hugo and Dave, I'm sure you're aware about it. If you're not, you had to file a blueprint that basically said what your plan was to migrate and get that off of. So I had a couple customers that we actually had to do that with. And it couldn't be an email thread because I got rejected for that. They had to take it out and put it into a Word document for them. So
had to be a fax.
Yeah, so that was nice to know. We had it kept going it back and forth, and they finally got everything the way they wanted, and they said, okay, now we can't take this as an email. It's like, okay, well that's special. So the replacement tool for the SharePoint Designer workflow is to, in theory, migrate to Power Automate. So again, we have links here to the guidance on that and automating flows in SharePoint. There's connectors for that. I can't remember why I threw that in there. So more information on that. About Power Automate, it is the successor to SharePoint Designer, new ways to build flows, but it is not a one-to-one replacement on designers. So just be aware that not everything will be as it was. You can usually work around most things, but that will be doing that. It's a cloud-based tool, so not running on your servers, which is nice. No client application has to be installed, and the recommended browser is going to be Edge for that to work. This is one of the slides that I like, though. How does it compare to SharePoint Designer? It gives you access to Office 365 as a whole, whereas SharePoint Designer, you only really had access to SharePoint Office and Outlook. So really increases the ability to what you have had access to. So we can create a lot more flows to read emails, to put them into OneDrive, take SharePoint documents, do approvals, send emails, update Planner, a whole lot more. So how do you connect all those products? There are a ton of connectors out there in the platform, in the Office 365 space. So at last count, I thought there was over 300 different types of connectors. I could be wrong on that if you guys know a better number than that, but
you are right, sir. They're increasing, but that's the number approximately at the moment.
Yeah, so we can connect not only into Office 365 connections, or there's a lot of third-party tools that we're also connecting with. This is a big one to keep in mind. SharePoint Designer to Power Automate. In SharePoint Designer, it was called Condition. Power Automate, condition controls, actions stay the same, but the stages go to scope control. Loops are the do one to control. Power blocks or parallel blocks become parallel branch. Start options become triggers. Initiation form, trigger outputs, and end of workflow is the terminate control. And anytime I'm saying anything wrong here, you guys can just yell at me. So I've got the experts on the line. So I had been mostly doing. I started out doing, so just my little disclaimer, I started out doing Power Apps and Flow a while ago, but with the whole COVID thing, I quickly became team governance. So I play in both fields, so I don't always, I'm not 100% sure on some of this stuff, but So the integration examples, we can set reminders, we can do sign-off requests, content approval, page approvals are some simple ones that we can do. And that was not what I wanted to do. That was an accidental hit on the
end button.
Yes. I need a back button. Is there a back button for PowerShell or PowerPoint? I've never done that before.
Oh. Yeah, it skipped. It jumped.
It skipped all the way to the end.
Okay. Well, now we know your calendar.
Now we know my calendar. Don't look at my calendar. This is why you only share applications and you don't share your desktops for security and compliance reasons.
All right. Take two.
Take two. Here we go. I'm going to have to edit that out. So the out-of-the-box workflows, again, not a one replacement, but this is what we were shooting for, right? Just so you remember what they were. And then we have our templated workflows in Flow, so we don't always have to start from the beginning, but you can see some of these are send approval workflows, form submission workflows, so we can customize them and take what's already there and start working with them. Power Automate templates, and these are just a few more of them, right? So start an application, send customized emails, send a customized email when a new file is added, send approvals. So a lot of the stuff that we would have used SharePoint Designer for, we tried to rebuild already for you. So most of the stuff you should be able to reasonably replicate very easily. And for those new to Flow, there's a link to getting started with Power Automate that has the Power Automate stuff in detail and examples in the training links and all that. So if you want to look there, but basically there are now up to 5 different flows, but the big ones are that we use out of SharePoint. They're more the automated flows, the infant flows, and the scheduling flows. Now there's the UI flow and the business process flow that kind of guide you through multiple steps.
You might hear this term, these guys use in the term called RPA. It's one of those new terms everyone's banning about. RPA basically does robotic processing. They're saying robots are going to rule the world, when in this case, you actually are in control of the robot that rules the world. So technically speaking, you rule.
Yeah,
for now, until it
UI
takes over.
flows, yeah.
For now.
UI flows are a great way if you have legacy systems that you can't integrate with APIs or get access to the database or any of that stuff. UI flows are a great way to connect to either a web page that has the application or a Win32 application that has the screens, and either feed the data to it or extract data from it, which is again a great way, to plan a what's the word here? Progressive transition away from your legacy systems.
Nice, thank you.
I thought UiPath, this is Jonathan, that's probably the soft emotion merger. Yeah. And I thought one of the things that was known for was soft bots, right? Software bots. And so Hugo, is what you just said kind of the bots looked at from a different angle?
Yeah, so there's 2 products combined together. One is the original UI flow that they had before the Soft Automate Soft Automate product that they just acquired recently. But Soft Automate, if you actually go to the Citizen Developer User Group, we do have an awesome presentation from the some of the founders that demonstrate the process, and it's a great way. It's pretty much like, instead of sending an email to John to say, John, please take this information from this system and type it into this system, you can have your bot basically that does that on your behalf. So it's very cool.
Don't tell your boss.
That's right.
Nice. Alrighty, thank you for that. And when we get to your section, we will let you pitch even further the Toronto user group and how we would get that information. So just high level, the automated flow, most common type of flow triggered by a designated event. So an action is performed Like something like a list is modified, a file is added, and then it does something there. We can do an instant flow, so triggered on demand. We can have a button that just does that. We can like a save button or submit button or something like that. And then just automatically collects the data and enters it into a SharePoint list. Then we can do schedule flows, which are big ones, not triggered by an event, but run at a specific time. So that's something that hasn't been in SharePoint Designer. So just something to take advantage of that we can set up and run on a regular basis. And then I'm going to leave off UI flows. I left off UI flows because it's relatively new or still in preview. Don't know. I personally don't know that much about it. But guided users through a defined set of consistent steps. So like an onboarding of a new hire of employees. So it's a bigger, long process that we can run on that. And I am kind of flying through this to make sure that we get through everybody. So if you have any questions, you can yell out. But what else? Workflow history, again, we talked about it's not going to be there. Turning off of settings, you can turn off or on a flow from the settings. And one of the things that View runs in the past 28 days. So but when you can view the runs, you can see why they failed, and you can see some of the history of that. So that helps. That helps a little bit better than what you used to be able to for troubleshooting, is to be able to see actually why it failed. Other thing is multiple owners for a flow. So you want to create team flows so that you don't have one person that just owns all the flow. Because if that person leaves or something happens to them, they get promoted, they win the lottery, then you have problems to do that. Let's see, flow runs with the credentials of the author of the flow. So that's also something important to know, so that, we're talking about permissions and those kind of things around that. So just make sure you know about that. And we have workarounds for some stuff where we would use the HTTP per connector. We can do API calls and those kind of things. So I have a little bit more on that. I thought I had that, but I think I deleted it out. And then just the triggers. Triggers are what drive an event to start. So we can have multiple triggers. You can say this like create a response when an item is created, modified. So that what kicks it off. We can run a flow on a schedule again, and we can do manual triggers. Running on a schedule, we can set the time. Wasn't available in SharePoint Designer. It exceeds what SharePoint Designer could do, but we can pause for durations. We can pick frequencies, intervals, time zones, and start times for them to run. We can do triggers inside a condition. So if we want to put a condition inside of a workflow that we're doing, we do the settings, and then we can trigger that condition based on what we're doing inside the workflow. So we can format examples if something happens, if rentable is true. We can, based on how the fields are set or things like that, we can do there. And then there's a link to more information on that. Data operations, so operations that we can do inside a table. We can compose, we can create CSVs, we can create HTML tables, we can do filters, joins, parse JSON, and select. And we have a link here to more data operations. We talk about actions, so kind of like connectors, there's a lot of stuff that we can do, thousands across the environment. If you do a search for them, like on SharePoint, it's actually got a really cool search feature and allows you to find out the different types of things that you can do inside of Flow. So if you get stuck, just kind of searching for what you might want to do, should be able to find them. And again, we're going to link to all of them here and setting that up. Open in an action bar, action details. So you can open up the action and see more information inside. So if we did like an update for a SharePoint, we can see that, put the site address, get the list name, get IDs from the fields, schedule migration dates, and a little bit more information about what's going on. We get a user interface to kind of a graphical interface to the flow. So it's nice and laid out and easy to do. If you guys have built them in SharePoint Designer, they weren't always the easiest thing to follow along, but this makes it a nice ability to actually visually look at your flow and try to figure out what's going on. And conditions are a nice feature of Power Automate. So branch lodging helps a lot when you're trying to do it. So you can create the branches. Doesn't necessarily have to be an if and an or. You can have multiple things to do. And then the nice thing is we can get dynamic lookups, so we can hook into a SharePoint site and be able to pull information out of a SharePoint list, SharePoint site, and pull that straight into our list. Power users, one of the nice things about it, for the get items and stuff, we can look into what's actually being called. So some of the code that's being there, there's a link to more information on that. And we can do HTTP requests, so we can put that information right in there to see how to do that. I missed one. You can also look at the JSON that's usually returned. I thought I had a screenshot of that. And then, so this, we've got documentation on guidance for doing your classic workflows to Power Automate. So recommendations how to convert them. And if you want to know about the limitations, click here, and this will give you all the limitations and the configurations on that. But there are some limitations in Power Automate. Let me pull that up. I thought I had that in there. Come on, come on. Yeah. So timeouts requests, message size, retry policies. So there's a lot of things that you might want to be aware of depending on what you're doing. Looping and detaching, 5,000, apply to each item depending on your plan. So just take a look at this sometime when you're doing things and you're trying to figure out why they might work. It might be a limit, but just some good stuff offhand to know.
Just to add a quick thing over there, if you're used to the old workflows doing stuff, and then we talk about limits over here, this is like what's available to you on the new system is way beyond what the old one could do anyway. So it's almost like someone said, well, now you can get 10,000 of these where you can only get 10 before. Yeah, but I could do the 10, and the 10,000 is exactly what I need might be the issue versus the limits. So unless you guys are really, really hitting it hard with like on-premises stuff, it should not be an issue to the limits should not be a problem.
Cool. Thanks for that
observation. Yep.
Yeah. And then if you want the latest and greatest, we have a blog for Power Automate and what's new. And with that, that is what I had. I know that was kind of quick, but for the city of Chicago people, I know we're going to go over it more in detail when we have our workshops. And a lot of it is just getting in there and practicing. And I don't know if you guys could hear, but my dog has been going nuts throughout the whole thing. So
is that what it was?
So I was trying to get through. Ralph, I'm going to turn it over to you and see if I can figure out what my dog was doing.
Okay, you're going to be nice to your dog, right?
I am going to be nice to my dog.
Okay. I'm going to edit that last statement out. There we go. Let's go back to that one over here. Or don't jump us. Don't jump on us now. Come back. Here we go. So what I'd like to do again, reintroduce our friends David Warner and Hugo Bernard as our sister user group, the Citizens Developers Group in Toronto. Is where I found these guys. No, actually, they're out in the community heavily. A lot of the stuff that we're doing with Power Platform, for example.
Ralph, I gave control to you.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay, great. So at this point, if there's any major questions, hang on to them for the SPD. But for now, we're going to talk about what's called the Sharing of Caring Initiative. The whole SharePoint Online, when everything went online, they really decided they were going to do something very, very different. And it's about 5-6 years ago now, I think 5 years ago at least, when they came up with the what was called the SharePoint framework. The SharePoint framework was a way of doing all these SharePoint apps in without having a lot of the burdens that we had before, where everything had to be fully trusted or you had to pay consultants massive amounts of money to make things happen. Now you don't have to pay so much, because what happened was they turned it into what's called an open source project. And if you guys are not familiar with open source projects, the concept is it's in a place where everybody can contribute. There is some controls, but there is let's just say a social contract with everyone who's working on things, that they're all going to be nice to each other. They're all going to work well with each other for the most part. Right. And the spirit of the community is, if somebody is like curating it, like say Microsoft, and put their stuff out there, other people, and they've determined this over the years, other people with more eyes out there looking at stuff, more things they will find, and more ideas will come about. So Microsoft could hire everybody in the world to work on their product that's going to service one customer, or they can say, here, customers, take a look. You like it? Or to the people that are out there, for the folks that have time, the folks with the wherewithal, to say, Microsoft, this is a better way, right? And because I need to get my work done, or because I'm a caring person, I would like to share with what I have. And this is not just Microsoft. Google, a lot of the other companies, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and everything else, are doing the same things. They're benefiting from it, but at the same time, they're giving back to the community. So there's a lot of free stuff that's out there that people get to use. Or for that matter, and if they're paying for something, they're not having to pay much extra, because a lot of that stuff is getting its boost from the community. And that's where our friendly friends, David and you, come in. Let's see. I think, David, you can put on your camera now, unless you went into witness protection. It's probably okay to go to camera mode.
Should be on. Do you not see me?
Yeah, it's on.
It is? Oh, hold on a second. Let me go into
You're sharing, so we only see them on the bottom.
Oh, that's right. So let me go into my gallery, and I'm going to go into together mode just so I can see everybody. And yes, there we go. So I see the three of us. So just so you guys know, this is sort of like what it looks like if you guys are looking at the chat. I think I've shown you guys together mode before, but this is sort of like what it looks like for all the people that are only on the video. The video is on. And
you're sharing your screen right now.
I'm not sharing my screen right now,
putting
but
it
I'm pasting it into the chat.
Chat window.
So you guys can actually take a picture of that, collect it, put it up in the post office or something. All right. So anyways, I just want to go. What I'd like to do is I'd like to talk with Dave and Hugo. All right. How did this come about? How did the concept come about where we said Microsoft's giving up stuff? They're letting people work with the community. But how did it come about where they're actually, let's just say, where people are actually getting involved with helping people actually contribute? Because before, you pretty much had to be a rocket scientist to work with the rocket science stuff. But what you guys are, you're like the rocket scientist whisperers, right? You're getting people that would not otherwise do it.
That far, but I can actually tell you exactly how the Sharing is Caring initiative started.
Yes.
Back at SharePoint Conference, my goodness, what are we, 2025 now? Feels like we've been locked down for that long.
Yep.
No, back at SharePoint Conference in 2019, VESA had a session on PNP, and I was in attendance, already working pretty heavily with the PNP team, but not officially on it yet. And he had talked about the struggles of contributing. And we said that it's an open source platform. All of the samples, all of the projects, the documentation, everything is open source, right? And open source used to be a very fragile word. It would either mean that, oh, I'm going to accept this code, but there's going to be no support for it, right? And so if it breaks, I'm on my own. So nobody really liked the concept of that. Or it means that I have to give up every cool idea I've ever created, and I don't want to give up the secret sauce recipe, which doesn't really matter. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But he had talked about how we're a very inclusive community and we want contributors. And we were already trying to find contributors, and we were very open to anyone contributing, but we understood that there was kind of that roadblock, if you will, to contributing, because a lot of everything we have, and as you see here, community docs, our code, were driven by GitHub. And because that's also open source, any changes you make, any submissions you make, contributions you make, were visible for the whole world. And GitHub has a little bit to go in terms of being a design that's completely and easily understood out of the box. It's not the most intuitive out of the box when you go to interface with it. So when he finished the session, he actually sat down at the table. We were sitting next to one another, and I said, I got an idea. What if I were to go out and tweet that I will personally walk through anyone in the community in a one-on-one session how to contribute? I will personally schedule time with you. And there was no personalized sharing is caring repo at the time. There was just the real repos. So what I had to do is I had to research and find areas that needed improvement, because you can actually make corrections to spellings and grammar mistakes and casing, and you can improve the documentation that is out there. So I would go find all these mistakes, and I would schedule time with those who reached out, and it turned into this repetitive event that was fantastic, but it wasn't scalable. So we went to VESA and said, hey, I got an idea. What do you think about this? What if we were to set up these hands-on sessions, guidance sessions, where we walk the community through in a group format? And oh, by the way, you get credit for being a PNP contributor, right? So just attending these sessions gives you credit. And for those who are not familiar with patterns and practices, we'll talk a little bit about that if there's time. But every month there is a monthly call that thanks the PNP contributors. And by being a part of these sharing is caring sessions, you are automatically a part of the contributors for that month. So that's kind of the backstory on how it got started. It went from this, little one-on-one session to the now, as you can see, multi-session, multi-time zone, multiple times a month opportunity to get involved with contributing, and now not only contributing but consuming some of the resources that Patterns and Practices offers as well.
Right. But it's not just code, though. So people think that when they're contributing and doing this stuff, that it's code. One of the biggest things, and this is why it's relevant to this group over here. Remember how we had Craig just walk us through some of these issues, going through that information. There's lots and lots of documentation out there. I mean, just Craig's slides alone. I think it's like about an hour's worth of documentation if you had to go through it at minimum. And that's at fast speed with that Evelyn Wood speed reading course to get through it, right? That's the best you can do with it. But with all that information that's out there, I mean, the fact that Microsoft keeps up with it is an amazing feat to itself. But now the community is potentially here to bear to look at this stuff. So if there's a sample out there, there'll be like a README file that says, oh, put it over here and don't forget to do this setting. Okay, but wait a minute, it didn't work. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to say you don't forget to have this in your folder. Okay, this is the sort of stuff. It's sort of like that documentation that is missing, right? And it's not to say anything bad necessarily about Microsoft or the person putting it out, but with all the things going on, not everyone catches everything. And the cool thing about this system of being able to contribute, I believe, right, is the concept that the documentation is also part of it. But how did that come about? How do they think about, because that was the part that suddenly, all of a sudden the docs were here in Microsoft.com, and then suddenly they were somewhere else that were suddenly editable. How the heck did that happen?
Well, and they still are, and I went ahead and took over the sharing here. So
yes,
let me know if you can see my screen.
I do.
All right. Well, so it's always really been that way. It's just not necessarily been a notable thing by many in the community. So take, for example, this page here. This used to be our landing page for Patterns and Practices. You would come here, you might find a mistake. Like, does anybody see a mistake in the title here, right? So if we saw that faux pas of SharePoint with the lowercase p, right, makes us all cringe and we kind of get sick to our stomach, then we may think, well, okay, that's a mistake. Someone's got to fix that, right? And you may see a couple of things that you notice. Well, first of all, we're sitting at docs.microsoft.com, right? The official Microsoft documentation. And you may also notice that there is an edit button available right there. But your first inclination is probably, well, I don't have access to that. I'm not a Microsoft employee. So I have no business clicking on that or trying to sign in or anything. And even if I do sign in using a Microsoft account, I'm not going to be able to edit this, right? But if we click on this, and I'll just open it in a new tab, where it takes us is behind the scenes, where this documentation actually lives, which is GitHub using a Markdown file. And if you're not familiar with Markdown, it's a fancy way of saying it's styled in a specific way so that when it gets created like this, we see these nice headers and we see the tables and the coloring and the shading, etc. But what's behind the scenes of all that documentation is GitHub. And you'll notice that there are multiple contributors to this particular page, 9 in fact. And if you find a mistake on this and you submit a pull request, your little face will get added, right, to being one of the contributors, which is a neat, nice little cherry on top. But the point is that we are empowered now to make changes to the documentation. And the changes don't just have to be mistakes. right? It doesn't just have to be a spelling correction or a grammar correction or a casing correction. We may find outdated descriptions. We may find documentation that could be better described, right? We may have samples that we want to contribute. We may even want to write an entirely new document that's going to live at docs.microsoft.com, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But even this existing documentation for development, we all are empowered to make changes to this. But as you can see, you come here to GitHub and you start seeing things like fork and blame and raw, right? And immediately, if you're not a developer that's comfortable with this environment or interface, you're abandoning the situation immediately. Immediately, you're like, all right, well, it needs to be fixed, but this is beyond my pay grade. I'm out. Now, that's where the sharing is caring initiative comes into play, because we have sessions that allow you to sign up and register for the sessions. Ralph is one of our attendees. So he can speak to whether or not they've been valuable for him or not.
Oh.
But we'll walk you through hands-on how to make all of the changes necessary to correct things like the lowercase p that we see right there, right? Now, there is a whole nother area of documentation, and we'll get further into this. I just want to kind of bait it.
Yep.
This documentation that you see right here that still lives at the docs.microsoft.com world, right? Again, this may look and feel like this had to have been created by nothing but Microsoft employees, but every single one of these pieces of documentation has been community contributed, every single one. And more is desired. More is desired. So
that's amazing. So it's sort of like people writing the docs for Microsoft. Before, we would depend on how they do things, and sometimes people would complain that it's not they don't understand it very well. When you talk with the Microsoft folks, they'd be like, well, you know, they're doing it based on how they're putting together that product, maybe the focus groups or particular clients that they've had, right? But in this case, this is ultimate, right? This is the community coming back, especially experts that have been doing this for a while, coming back and putting it in a place rather than searching the whole willy internet to find this blog, that blog, and everything else. Here it is in the place where you expect to find information. Microsoft stuff in the Microsoft place.
And the problem with it's not just a Microsoft thing, but in a lot of IT companies, you know, documentation for the majority of developers is kryptonite, right? It's the worst thing they can ever have to do. And Microsoft is not any different. And often they have to throw, you know, the product over the wall to the documentation people to try to get them to write documentation. And unfortunately, while they're really good at documenting each individual products, Microsoft goes to market from a product strategy, right? This is the list of products we have, and for each product we have a bunch of different groups that don't talk to the other groups, and we have often no idea what the other groups are doing. I'm going to write my documentation from my very narrow perspective. And the community, who are the users of that documentation and the users of the product, that use it in real world scenarios, they look at this and they say, well, what about, you know, a situation where I want to combine, I don't know, Microsoft 365, Azure, and Power Platform together, right? How do I combine these three things together? And this is where the community docs come in. It's our opportunity to document. I think, Ralph, you've already
I have a document here, actually, the licensing one, for example. The licensing. We had a session on it. In fact, it was this user group where I first did my licensing bit, and then it turned out to be so popular that Mark Anderson said, "Hey, why don't you write the doc?" So I ended up doing it, and believe it or not, it was this group. Thank you very much, my friends, who actually got me the practice to write it.
Yeah, so I mean, Microsoft has evolved significantly, because there used to be a time where they were the only people that were right, and what do we know, right? We're just the users. But now they've recognized that, wait a minute, the community has something to contribute, and you know, there's a place that is clearly marked as community content, and if that content becomes to a point where Microsoft goes, wow, this is really good, we should really adopt this content and take it over, they will eventually move that into their main documentation. So that's great.
Yeah, and a lot of times there's questions from the community around, is it my place?
Yes.
Right? Is it my place to submit documentation And then that's a fear, and that's a real fear, and that's really what's always started as a fear of contributing. Whether is it my place or fear of making a mistake, right? In this open source world of GitHub, where this is very confusing and lots of buttons that don't make any sense, and I don't know if I have the rights or the authority, or is it my place to make a change? And the answer is yes. I mean, if you look right here, all content is community generated, right? In certain areas of this ecosystem. So if there's any fear at all around, is it my place, then we promise you it is your place. Now, you may want to feel confident going in and knowing that you feel confident in knowing how to make those contributions. Of course, that's where these events kind of come in handy.
But you can also like submit a bug to it, just like in the old days.
Yep. In fact, if you go over to here now, all of the GitHub accounts have issues lists, right? So there's one. DevDocs has quite a bit because, as you can imagine, it's very, very big. But even the community content, if we were to come in and open up this in the GitHub behind the scenes, it also has issues, right? And the issues list is fantastic because not only is there an issue for, hey, I have a problem with this existing document, but it's also an opportunity to say, there's actually suggestions here. Some people come in and provide a suggestion and say, oh, I'd like to see an article based on this or based on that.
Hey, look at mine. Mine is red right there, right? The second one.
Article issue, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
So that's an example of Ralph's got work to do.
Well, and there's also a lot of collaboration. So I'm going to open up a new tab and go to an issue here that shows that it's a very inclusive, collaborative environment. So here we have a community contributor named Harsha. She had a great idea for something. So we see an article suggestion, gave the details of what was needed. Mark, who owns the community docs repo, said, hey, that's a great idea. In fact, he asked her, would you like to write that? And she was like, I'm not quite there yet. I'm still exploring the stages, but it'd be best if someone else wrote it, which is okay to say. And then if we scroll down a little bit, we see that Todd took this over. He came in and said, I'll grab this, we'll get something out there, and we'll see what gaps that need to fill. Right. So it shows the collaboration between the community and the ability to just throw an idea out there or throw your hat in the ring to take an idea.
Highlight that if you go back to that really quick, I'd like you to highlight exactly where you were when Todd picked it up. You see that help wanted tag? You see that there's like tools like that, like help wanted.
Yeah. Right? And so if we come down here and scroll through, we can see there's some help wanted article suggestions, discussions, questions. Right.
And you should be able to click on help wanted to filter by issues by help wanted. There you go.
Yep.
There you go.
So if you're looking for ideas,
it easy to come in and take ownership of something.
Or send them all to Todd.
Todd will pick them up eventually.
Yes, exactly. That's our goal.
Yes. But you see how this works, right? Now, what I like about this is it's not so much that this is happening with the SharePoint side of things necessarily. This stuff actually, there's Power Platform stuff in here.
Yeah.
Right. It bleeds over because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, so it's called the integration, the big picture, right? And the concept of how this is done, this kind of, let's just say, style. It's almost like what, dare I say, agile style of making things happen. It's like it's almost like real world what big companies are now doing internally. That's why that Amazon literally will churn around projects on a daily basis in such humongous speeds because they have tools like this that are not so much automated, but that are so, let's say, vastly published that people can pick it up from anywhere and get going. There's no waiting if necessary. It doesn't have to wait. It just can go.
Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, but doesn't this seem, I see like Mark, for example, is like the head of the repo. Do those folks get overwhelmed though, if like a whole bunch of people are contributing and are waiting for back comments or anything like that? Doesn't that overwhelming?
I mean, the PNP team, and let me bring up another URL here, aka.ms/m365pnp. And then I'll just put our direct link. So the Patterns and Practices team is made up of a lot of people here. And I will say that this is by far the most inclusive and helpful and supportive and collaborative team that I've ever been a part of.
And good looking.
Yeah, absolutely.
We support one another. So as you can see, Mark owns that community docs, but Hugo and I own the Sharing is Caring initiative, and we're always cross collaborating to try to help one another. So does it get overwhelming? No, because you don't have to be a member of the PNP team to help out in some of these respects. What we do ask is that you're a little patient sometimes, because as Hugo will attest to, many of the Sharing is Caring sessions, the management of these repos are really done free of charge, right? We're doing this as contributions ourselves in the community, and we don't get paid for it. So sometimes we get busy, life gets in the way, family, work, clients. And so we may have to go in and wait a few days to respond to something. But we try to make sure that we're responding to everyone in a reasonable amount of time in some way or some fashion. Yes, I can post that team.
Indeed.
Can you post a GitHub thing too? The initial one.
The Sharing is Caring?
Yeah.
Let's get the Sharing is Caring in there.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
I mean, a lot of this, for example, if you have developers in your company, if you're coming in from the platform side, you have developers that are doing so, especially if they're working with you on creating, say, custom connectors or creating those front end pages for you to work with your Power Apps or your Pod Automate. It behooves them to come to these sessions for themselves, because think about this. They're going to probably come over and get examples from these guys, right? And then the example doesn't exactly do what it does. But you can't traditionally call Microsoft and say, hey, fix it. It's your fault. It's not. It's community contributed. So there's two things. You could maybe go ahead and question the community, get some issues up and saying, I'm trying to fix something. Hopefully someone will fix it. Or how about they're empowered to fix it themselves, and more importantly, get credit. Do we have one of those pages where it shows all the contributors and like saying, hey, look, Microsoft recognizes you? I think we have one of those pages somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have the PNP monthly.
The monthly, yeah.
There's September, right? Actually, that's my monthly.
That's your monthly.
But it'll take us to, there we go.
Their monthly.
So here is the monthly blog, right? So for those that aren't overly familiar with PNP, we do, and we'll talk about this too. There are weekly community calls that you can join. And we recommend it, and we'll tell you a little bit why in a little bit. But it's like a crystal ball into what's coming soon for SharePoint. So, if you have trouble keeping up with the changes in Microsoft, I think we all can say
any of these items down over here. Take a look at there's Power Apps over there. They're here.
Yeah. Now, not all of these sessions are run by the PNP team. That one is, and that one is.
Right.
So it's really on average one call a week. But twice or once a month, we have 2 calls in a week for the monthly call, and then the weekly call that falls on that week. Right. Well worth your time. Trust me, it's well worth your time. But if you can't attend, they're all recorded and you can watch them later. I do a screenshot summary here that kind of shows what each session or call goes over, so you can see all the. Well, I'll show it in a minute. All the quick sessions. This is the monthly one, so we actually took a little picture. Let's see, Ralph, are you in there?
May not be in this one in particular. I was in one of them, but not this one.
Okay, all right. Well, we go over, so we see. Yeah. Here are all the contributors from the previous month, and they're all identified too in the blog. So if I were to come in here and see Ralph, were you? Oh, look at that.
Hey, there I am.
Right, Ralph
I wonder
is
how
there.
that happened.
I don't know. Maybe attended a call.
I did.
And so you get credit for that, right? And this is a great way of kind of keeping track. But yeah, there is credit given. And like we said, these documents, when you go and look at them, I'll go back and I'll even just look at the simple, what is a site column? We can see that there's the other kind of cherry on top, right? Very small. It's a nice little add-on, but it just does show that you are contributing, right? And if you were to actually go to the GitHub page that drives this documentation, then you see there and you're able to see who's actually contributing to these docs, and it's pretty cool.
Impress people at parties.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Show management how many contributions you're making.
Me and Bill, we're like this. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. Yeah.
So wow. So that okay. So
stupid question. This has nothing to do with what you're talking about. But how do you do the drawing on the screen? Because
presentation tricks, tips.
So there is a tool called Zoom It by Microsoft.
I didn't know that it could draw. I just know you can zoom, but I never.
Yeah, you can draw different colors, right? So I could say orange. I can say right. I can go to red, green, blue. You can do that. Draw little boxes. You can do that. I mean, yeah. So it's handy.
Zoom it. Get to learn it.
Yep.
Be a power at your next presentation.
Yeah. Now, I did want to highlight what Ralph had said, though, is that typically when people think of GitHub, they think, okay, code, developer, right? You're writing solutions, software. This is not for your non-coders, but it absolutely is. As we've seen, all of this community documentation, which is important. You don't have to be a coder to be able to write good guidance. And by writing that guidance, you should want to share it, and you can do that. Now, granted, it does get interfaced and created by way of GitHub, but that's what these sharing is caring sessions are about. We have a first-time contributor session, we have a community doc session, and then we have more sessions coming up, one of which is definitely for coders, SPFX, using the samples. But if you're looking to start contributing and you don't feel like you are a developer, that's okay. There is still so much opportunity for you to contribute. So definitely sign up for these two.
And we'll see your name in lights soon.
Yes. And one of the barriers, I think, yes. So there are a few barriers, right? The first one is GitHub is scary, is not my place. What if I make a mistake? But another one, when it comes to community documentation, I think a big barrier for people is, well, there's someone that's better suited than me to write this, right? Someone's going to be better. Someone's going to be more clever about this. And Mark Anderson's famous for saying this. He'd rather have something that is semi-comprehensive that fills a gap than have the perfect article that never gets written, right? So if you do have something to contribute and you don't see the article there and you think you have something that you can add, like at least write an issue to say, hey, I would like to write about this. Can I write about this? But definitely write. You can take an old blog post that you've written, or you can write something from scratch and you can put it up there, and then let the community. I don't want to say rip it apart, but let the community, look at it and then add more to it
and build on it.
And build on it. That's what I've done. I've written something about information architecture, and I think a lot of people in the community have added more to it. And it has evolved over time, and it's great. And honestly, before that, I would have been like, oh, someone maybe, Joanne Klein can write something about it, or someone like that, right? And you don't have to wait for that.
Yeah, hey, and you meet interesting people in the process. Like I got to meet John Liu through this one. I could never get a hold of him to talk about stuff, but because he didn't like what I wrote on the one licensing thing, I got an earful. But it was the right earful. It was the right earful. It's like, oh, it was one of those like the light of your head moment where he said, oh, I know something now Microsoft doesn't know because I had the other guy finally explain it to me in the right way. So I gave him credit for it, for example, in my article, real easy to do. And in the end, now that when I put something out, he responds to me very, very quickly. I made a friend.
That's awesome.
In the right way. So, by the way, so John Liu, what's he famous for? He's famous for the Flow Studio. So, yes. If you guys are doing Flow and you want to do it with like some sort of like UI, sort of like you're used to, we were talking earlier about SharePoint Designer. Well, there's Flow Studio, and it's free, and it's from John. And if I have a problem with it, I get to talk to John. Yay. But then you can talk to me and I can talk to John. Hey, how about that? There we go.
That's right. You charge a small little transfer fee, right?
Just a small transfer fee. That's all. Just a little thing in a brown bag in the park. No problem. But so you see the concept over here, folks. The concept is like we're a community. That's why we're doing the user groups and everything else. We're not charging you to come here. We're not doing this because we want to somehow... I don't know. We're not going to profit from it. Really, what we're doing is we're greasing our wheels. In this case, we're making it smoother for us to get our things done, to get,
That's
and in
right.
some cases also, how do we say it, satisfying that real need to be community, especially now the way things are going. If there's any time to be a community, it's now.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of those sessions are free too. There's no charge for any of them. They're completely free.
Right.
And we're doing more and more sessions all the time, and we're trying to do them in times that are friendly for all the world, really. So
Right.
Ralph knows we had just finished an APAC friendly time. Started at 4 a.m. Pacific time. So I'm in Los Angeles. So we got up early and had a great session, and everybody had a lot of fun. And so it's really a global community. There's no reason why everyone has to conform to one particular person's schedule or one particular country's schedule or time zone. We want everyone to be involved. It really is. We joke that the sun never sets on PNP because we want the community all over the globe to be included.
Exactly.
Well, what's interesting to kind of go into all that is how much, like I try to stress to people, how much the community stuff can be beneficial to you in your career, and for one, for your career moving up, and two, just getting stuff done. Like, so I've been involved in different type of communities since probably 2010, right? And I'm at Microsoft now, and a lot of that has to do with who I knew and met along the way. But going to these user group meetings, going to SPS events, and meeting people like Ralph. Like Ralph's one of my go-to guys now. I mean, Ralph's always been, but there's other people that I've met from all over the world, right? That I got a problem with flow. Hey, Ralph, how did you do this? Right? And you can't really beat that access, as you said. And then, like, I noticed one I thought was interesting. I saw Louise's name, Louise Freeze.
Yes.
In a couple of those GitHubs, and like, so out of nowhere, I'm going to call it out of nowhere. Like 2 to 3 years ago, I never heard of her, never seen her in anything, but she started doing the sketch notes for different events. And now she's giving the GitHub, and she's in Germany, and she is one of the biggest names in the whole.
She just did a session with the Toronto folks while she was in Germany on their time zone. So she was like late night giving a presentation and going through it like a champ. I mean,
she's amazing.
She's awesome.
Yeah,
she's
but
really close to Hugo and I. But
just building off of doing notes, right? Doing some really awesome sketch notes, and then getting into the Power Apps world and creating Power Apps and flows and doing a lot of the documentation to start. Now, every time I see her, she's doing something really cool and getting pretty deep into development, I think.
Yeah, she doesn't call herself a developer. She does a lot more development than she gives herself credit for.
Yes, it is. She does. She won't admit it.
She was an attendee actually just in the last few weeks for some of our sharing as caring sessions, and it lit a fire inside of her because, as we talked about, that roadblock for GitHub was there, and she had no concepts behind it, and she hadn't had the experience. So when we walked through how to do everything, now she's a fireball of documentation for community docs. I mean, she is amazingly awesome when it comes to giving of herself and time to the community. So a perfect example of how if we all work together and not just, hey, this is out there for you, go use it, but we actually walk one another through how to use it, we're all empowered to do more. And there's a lot of initiatives, again, within PNP here that you can take advantage of, because Craig, you had mentioned there's resources available that can make you better at your job. And in some cases, and I'll turn it over to Hugo in a minute, but we have repos here in GitHub for column formatting, which is very much a citizen developer kind of experience. SharePoint Framework, web parts and extensions, which obviously gets a little bit more into development. But these are tools that are there not just for you to use, but actually deploy. There are a lot of solutions here that I know people have come, taken, developed or packaged, given them to a client, and joked that I didn't even have to do anything. It's almost embarrassing how little I had to do to deliver a valid, viable, fully production-ready solution to some clients. And Hugo, you run the web part side, which again, a little bit beyond citizen developer realm, but the same principle applies in being able to take some of these things like column formatting, Teams app samples, etc., the SharePoint Starter Kit, and use them in a way that makes you better as a SharePoint consultant or person in the community.
And I think it's a good point that even though this is a Power Platform user group where we're not really targeting to developers, I would say the majority of people that reach out to me from the web parts repository or the web part sample repository, for example, they are people who are not developers, who have seen one of these samples and they say, this is exactly what I've been looking for. Can you help me? I'm not a developer. I just need to get this going on my tenant, and just quickly walk them through the process. It's a very cool tool that people have. And then if you happen to be a developer, or if you want to get started learning how to develop these things, we got all the source code for all these samples, and you can crack it open. You can make it your own, or if you find ways to improve it, you can actually make a change on someone else's sample and submit that sample or that update to that sample and get a contribution mention for it. Yeah. So it's a great way to do this.
I will say, Dave Warner reminded me earlier, by the way, that being positive is a good thing, because sometimes I get into this like Jim Cramer rant or something. So I'm like, okay.
Ralph, you're just always a big teddy bear.
Yes, except when I'm in growl mode. One of my growl modes is when people, let's just say, especially for the developers, this is the way we used to feel about the so-called IT cabal in the past. When we wanted something, you're like, oh, you cannot have my soup. Go ahead. And that's why we developed Excel. And then next thing you know, the rest was history. It's like the same folks that say, oh, well, that's the PNP, that's the open source. We don't really know much about it. It's like, it's a bit of developer malpractice not to at least be aware of it, number one. If you have a group of developers and they feign either ignorance, and it'll probably be just feigning because they know about it, or saying that, no, we have a better way, please try to encourage them. Do not reinvent the wheel. Please come and take a look. Because the good thing about again, when things are in one place, when you're speaking to each other, you're speaking in the same language. Versus someone, if I created something, if you put two people in an island, they never talk to each other, and you ask them to build a chair, God knows that chair will be vastly different. If they were on the same island looking at each other, building the chair, even though you told them to work by themselves, the fact that one could see the other will influence the chair. Mm-hmm. It'll probably look a lot more similar, right? So again, the point is, spread the word, right? If you're not the one doing it, if you have a group, you have people that you know, you have your third party, whoever it is, just ask them the question, hey, did you guys are looking at this? They're like, yeah, of course we know about that. Okay. We just wanted just checking, because at least I know that if I go there and look, I can say, I found this. What are your thoughts? They can't be like, oh, I got to look that up. I don't know anything about it. It's going to be more like, oh, yes, I have looked at that. Here's what I say. Or like, oh, that is actually good. Let me look at it further, and they know where to go. Right. Or maybe they're empowered to say it's good enough, but not good enough. I can fix it. Great. Guess what? I can actually do it. I'm going to attend chairs carrying, and next thing you know, I'm fixing it, and I get credit. And I help
fixing it or upgrading it. There's improvement. Exactly. And I mean, right, the typical old phrase, 2 minds are better than 1, 3 are better than 2, 4 are better than 3, etc. All that helps is the pace of innovation. Right. And so we all go create things on our own in a bubble, as Ralph said, we used to hold very close to the vest. This is mine. I just spent 40 hours creating this, and you want me to just give it to this open source thing to the community for free? That was a hard mental block for a lot in the community and a lot in the industry to get over. But what has happened is this rapid pace of accelerated innovation that happens when everyone goes together. I think it came by way of fear. People thought, if I give this away, no one's going to want to hire me to actually implement this or do the work, which is completely untrue. You think of like a $100 5-star meal, whether that's lobster, steak, or whatever it is your favorite expensive dish is. In most cases, the chef can give away the recipe, the ingredients, and the instructions on how to cook it. And 9 times out of 10, people are still going to pay for it because they either enjoy the experience, or they know it's not going to be done perfectly like it was by the chef, or they just don't have the wherewithal to do it or the desire, right? It's the same principles all apply here. You can give someone the tools to build this amazing home, but 9 times out of 10, they're still not going to do it, even though they've got at their disposal the ability to do that. So giving away and having this collaborative worldwide global effort to contribute and improve together, it creates what we see today, which is an incredible amount of resources and tools through the Patterns and Practices community.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm an independent consultant, and I take a lot of the samples I've written, I'll put them out there for free, and I'll have people reaching out to me because of the work that I've done that's available for free. They'll reach out to me and they'll want to hire me to implement something based on what I've started, even though what is there is for free. Like Ralph, I was telling you about this tool that I've built that allows you to convert InfoPath forms, extract InfoPath forms, convert to Power Apps. And
we're talking about that now, are we?
Oh well, I mean,
it's not a secret anymore.
This is an example, right, of something that I put together that I was not trying to do this to make money from it. I just wanted to release it to the community. Maybe someone will benefit from it.
That's going to be one of our future sessions, by the way, Craig, because that the whole concept over here is like, I know a lot. I think for even the folks in Chicago over here, if you think about, I'm not sure if you guys are using InfoPath, but for a lot of the people that have InfoPath, there's like sometimes they have thousands of forms.
Yeah.
They got to move them over. There is no tool out there at all that does this. Everyone's like literally hiring consultants at big bucks to work through the concepts of it. But as it turns out, there are certain patterns that say, well, hold on a second. Before you hired that consultant, did you think it through a little bit first? And that's essentially Hugo is like bringing in the concept of, hey, when we thought it through, these are the common pieces that you probably, most of the work that you need to do is here. After that becomes the consultants that come through. Exactly. We're not taking away from consultants, but the idea is we're empowering you guys to take a look at what happens, and we're doing it via community. So,
but the whole point is that even though we're doing these things for free and we're contributing to the community, I think that it's a mutually beneficial process, right? Everybody wins ultimately. That's what I'm thinking.
Yep, totally agree.
Hey, Ralph. Great conversation, but we're hitting almost close to 2 hours on this call. Do we want to start wrapping up?
We should wrap it up. I was like at the 10-minute mark before the 7 o'clock hour. We were going to see if there was any tips anybody would like to share. I mean, some of them we've shared a little bit. I like the Zoom It tip. The Zoom It tip was my favorite tip today because I keep forgetting to reinstall it into whatever new laptop I get. I always install it somewhere. I forget about it, and then I get a new machine, and I forget to install it. That's how long it's been. So Zoom It is one of my tips today. My other tip, of course, well, I brought my tips. I brought Dave and Hugo. My tips right over here. Major tips. Has anyone like remember we said we'd come back to anyone who have any specific questions or are looking for a specific maybe ask anything at this point that may not take more than a few minutes to discuss, or maybe we can follow up on a thread. Let's go through a little bit of the question-y type things first. Anybody out there? Is our friendly friends still out there? Jonathan? I think we left you hanging.
Questions, and this is Taffy. I wanted to ask Tim if he had any questions pertaining to the migration that he wanted to ask right now. But if he doesn't, that's okay. I'm sure we have a whole compilation of them that we need to ask. But if he wanted to take this time to see if there's anything him or Jorge wanted to ask.
They're thinking it through, going through their notes. And they're probably going to save it they're going to hit Craig with it next time. Craig, get ready to get slammed at the next meeting.
Yes, he will.
So I do have our in conclusion slide up. The next meeting will be October 21st, so it's always the third Wednesday. Friday the 13th, our M365 Chicago will be virtual. Tap me, I'll send you the link about it, but it's going to be an all-day conference on Friday the 13th. That'll be virtual. And then Ignite is the next 2 weeks. So anything that doesn't get covered in Ignite, we'll try to cover it here.
Okay, great.
That's very ambitious, but we probably will succeed there.
No, we won't, but we'll try.
Yes, tell your friends. We're hoping more people attend in person than wait for the recording. For all of you waiting the recording, we're not slamming you. Yeah, but we're slamming you. No,
we do get fairly good numbers on me.
This is after 5 o'clock, City of Chicago time, and we're off at 5 o'clock. So
indeed,
it's kind of an issue on the timing. But if you had it at 1 o'clock, I'm sure we all would attend.
Right. And I would like to show point out the link that was pasted in here. Toronto is our second city, sister city. They're 1 hour ahead of us, and they have a user group that's on Meetup that's meeting virtually as well. So between the two of us, at the very least, you could have all your needs met. Who knows?
That's right.
No, and I love the dynamics between everyone and how you communicate and how you presented this information. It was very, very informative. So I do appreciate it. And I do appreciate being on the call because I learned a lot too.
We are so honored.
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So get involved, Taffney, and to make Tim do it too.
No, I'm sure Tim's here, Tim and Jorge, but they wanted to make sure it was recorded, like I said, because it's after our time, and
right.
You know,
so. We'll have it for you.
Well, that said, I'm going to stop recording.
All right.
I don't forget.
And now you may speak freely.